What does that mean? My secret. No hearing person has ever gotten in here to find out.
8 claps and 8 jumps. Try that for me, you ready? And 1.
Acting for me is like life itself. I've been acting all my life. At school, if I couldn't understand the teacher, I'd use gestures to them. And when there were no subtitles on the television, I'd watch the actors' expressions, when they were angry or happy. I learned from them. So that has been my training. I was born on January the 20th, 1955, here at Mile End Hospital. When I was born, they phoned my father at work, saying, "Congratulations, he had a healthy baby girl." He rushed to the hospital, where a nurse brought a sister, who told him how worried she was about the baby. She showed him a baby in an incubator with a swollen head, possibly premature. My father said to her that they'd said on the phone it was a healthy baby girl. It turned out the other baby had the same surname, Edwards. So they took my father to another bouncing baby, and he said, "Yes, that one's mine." I often wonder what would have happened if I'd been swapped and brought up in a hearing family. I'd have been a different person.
When she was small, Jean was always falling over. She was mischievous, a real tomboy. She was always having accidents, but she never cried. She was very brave.
My brother Terry and I went to the William Morris School in Walthamstow. I took it for granted having a deaf brother. I remember once I was trying to tell the teacher about this brilliant film I'd seen at the weekend. I was signing about all these skeletons fighting with swords. The teacher hadn't a clue what I was talking about. So she fetched Terry from another class, and he told her. It was Jason and the Argonauts.
I was Jean's big brother, and she did talk about wanting to be an actress when she grew up. I thought, for a deaf person, impossible. But she stuck to her dream and she made it.
As I was growing up, I always went to Romford Deaf Club with my mum and dad, and I learned about life there. Watching people gossiping about love affairs, jobs, unemployment, money, that kind of thing. I used to absorb what I learned from there and pass it on to my friends at school, because if they came from hearing families, they wouldn't be getting that sort of information. I didn't really understand the importance of the exam to get into Mary Hare Grammar School. I just played about, but I passed. I was the first pupil from William Morris to pass the Mary Hare entrance exam for 10 years. They put it in the local newspaper with a quote from the headmaster saying, "It's a double achievement. She's a deaf child of deaf parents," meaning I was doubly handicapped. Looking back at it now, I think, me? Doubly handicapped? Come on. Education at Mary Hare was really hard. Passing your O-levels really depended on the teacher. If they were easy to lip read, you passed. If they were difficult, you failed. So much of our education relied on speech and lip reading, but I'd grown up signing. I remember one day I was really upset and I was crying my eyes out when a teacher came and asked me what was wrong. I began to explain to her in sign and she panicked. She said, "Don't sign, it isn't allowed, tell me." But my first language was sign and I wasn't allowed to use it. It made me become quite withdrawn and quiet. At Mary Hare, most of the friends I stuck together with came from deaf families. We always used to talk about deaf power. We must have understood even then that we were oppressed. My favourite times were when my parents came, like sports days, because then we could sign all day. The teachers were annoyed, but we just ignored them and carried on signing. It was great. In drama, they handpicked people who could speak well. I couldn't speak, so I was pushed aside. But the pupils organised their own talent contests, and I won that 3 years running. So I felt, I can act. But the school didn't recognise my acting ability because I couldn't speak well enough.
Just before we left school, I remember Jean had us all agog as usual with one of her stories. She said one day, when she was rich and famous, she was going to come back to Mary Hare in a Rolls Royce or a helicopter. She would march up the drive in her big fur coat, bang on the headmaster's door, storm into his office and tell him, "I told you I'd make it."
When I was 16, I left school and started work here at Barclays Bank. For the first time, I was the only deaf person amongst hearing people. I was told there was no chance of promotion because I was deaf and I couldn't use the phone. So I left. And after a number of jobs, I managed to get into the theatre.
What was different about Jean was she was a very natural actress, which I think is unusual for a deaf actor. Most deaf actors on stage look like they are acting or performing for an audience. Jean was a natural actress, a real natural.
So they were married to be the more together, and found they were never again so much together, divided by the morning tea, by the evening paper.
I remember seeing Jean in a television programme called Second House. Her signing was so clear, I thought she was in a class of her own, because it was native to her. Nowadays, there are a lot of deaf actors whose signing isn't very good, and they don't seem to care. They don't bother to really work on it. But Jean has both. Her signing's beautiful, and her acting's beautiful, and that always comes across and hits you.
I was 20, I'd done 2 national tours, and I'd made my first television appearance. When I applied for my Equity Actors Union card, they told me I'd have to change my name, because there was another actress called Jean Edwards. So I drew up a list of different names and showed them to some colleagues at work. They all seemed to like one particular name, Jean St. Clair. So that's what I became. I loved the theatre, but I also had a passion for travelling. I read a book called Exodus, and that made me want to go to Israel. So I applied for a place in a kibbutz, a kind of collective farm. At the interview, they said there would be too many problems because I was deaf. I said I'd had problems all my life because I was deaf, so why not have problems in Israel? The interviewer laughed, and they accepted me. I went to Israel in 1976 for 3 months, and I ended up staying for 15.
In 1976, the British Theatre of the Deaf finished. Then, 2 years later, Chris Harrowell and myself started the Interim Theatre Company. At that time, Jean was in Israel, but she came back to join us for the tour of The Fisherman and His Soul, which was very good. Ian Kellgren of London's Royal Court Theatre had been asked in 1979 to direct a new play called Hearing at Birmingham's Repertory Theatre. He came to me because he was looking for a deaf actress to play the part of a deaf girl working in a factory. I said there was only one actress for that part, Jean. That was a big breakthrough because Jean was the first deaf actress in a hearing company.
Does it hurt? I don't know why she thought she had to get her ears pierced. They've been nothing but trouble ever since. Does it hurt?
Yes.
She doesn't get ones that are properly plated. That is not proper gold.
Go! Where you go?
In 1979, the Arts Council of Great Britain gave funding for myself, Terry Ruane and Sarah Scott, to go and train at the National Theatre of the Deaf Summer School in America. I was thrilled when they offered me a job the following year. I was all ready to go, but that year my father was very ill. He was dying, and I wasn't sure about going, although it was a good opportunity for me. But my father made me promise him I'd go, so I did. And that very night, he died. Working in America was a revelation. They were so full of deaf assertiveness and deaf rights. It was in America that I worked with Carol Lee Aquiline, the American actress. She's now the General Secretary of the World Federation of the Deaf.
Jean brought with her a vast amount of experience and analytical skills. For example, she could take a piece of theater text and she could analyze it in detail until she actually became that character. It was excellent. She also brought with her a lot of professionalism. And she was an excellent role model for young deaf people.
In 1980-81, the play Children of a Lesser God was a smash hit on Broadway in New York. And they held auditions for a London production, so I went along. And they gave me the job of understudy for the leading role of Sarah. I wasn't sure if it would be the right decision for me to leave my job at the National Theatre for the Deaf just to understudy, but I thought it might lead to bigger things in the future, so I went for it. At first, I thought I was never going to go on stage because Elizabeth Quinn never got sick. But eventually, she went on holiday, and I took over the lead role opposite Oliver Cotton. When the play finished its run here, we took it to South Africa, Ireland, back here again to the Albury, and then later we toured Britain.
It was Jean, really, who used to take me upstairs to it wasn't in this dressing room, but it was upstairs in this theatre. We used to go upstairs, and she would sit for hours and hours with me, going through the signing and playing the part of Sarah Norman to me, and signing back to me the things that I had to have signed back to me. And that's really how our friendship started. And our relationship as actor and actress started with sitting upstairs in this theatre, me nearly crying with fear, and her helping me. She was invaluable. I wouldn't have been able to do it without her, actually.
Got to be that when I went home weekends, the boys were lined up on a waiting list that my sister kept for me. Most of them didn't even take me for a Coke first. No introduction, no conversation. We just went straight to a dark place and... But I liked that communication. I loved it. Made me feel a whole lot better than this bullshit talk that you make.
You know, it's every hearing actor's dream to appear in the West End. And I'd made it in Children of a Lesser God. It also helped me to find myself an agent. And I began to get work on television.
Send that to Sarah.
Gee, how lovely.
Hello,
darling. Oh. How are you? Are you fine? How lovely. Haven't you got... Look.
Oh.
Yes.
I had a client in Children of a Lesser God, and I went for the first night, and I went round afterwards to see her, of course, and Jean was there. That's the first time I met her, and the next day Joan rang me to say that Jean needs an agent, and would you be interested? And I thought, well, it's a challenge, yes, why not? And so that's how she joined the agency.
Happen.
With heart, with death, a dream.
In 1986, Children of a Lesser God finished. I still wanted to work in the theatre, and really I'd go wherever there was a job. I got a job offer in Australia, and that's where I went. I did 8 plays altogether with the Australian Theatre of the Deaf. What made a terrific impact on me, I remember, was, for my first play, we spent a whole week doing a full translation from the written English into Australian Sign Language, Auslan. Looking back, I realised I'd never had anybody to monitor me before. It's so important to get it right for a deaf audience. Colin Allen and I got involved in making a video about AIDS. I was the co-director. It became quite notorious because of the walking fingers scene. Colin and I had a baby, Tara, and I came home to England for 10 months. I went back because I had a book to finish and some other projects I was involved in. But I couldn't carry on working in the theatre. With the baby, it was too hard.
Okay, now
Yes,
Sound
okay.
Warp is the book.
Yeah, the illustrator was Stephen Cater. The book is Sound Warp. Beautiful drawings in it.
Is it a good story?
Yes. It's about a hearing girl that goes into a world of silence. But also, you have to try and work out the clues in the book.
I didn't feel there were enough books for deaf children, so I thought I'd write my own. I brought in some other people to help me improve it and get it published, and I called it Sound Warp.
Her cloak continued to change colours until they straight into the hole, which was closed.
I'd been in Australia for 6 years, and I wanted to know what it would be like living back in England, especially now that I had a child. So I booked my flight. But just before I left, I had this whirlwind romance with Angus, and I became pregnant with Toby, who, like me, was born in England. In the past, my main priority had always been the theatre and acting. But since having children, my priorities have changed. As a single mother, they're my main concern. I dearly love the theatre, but I feel their childhood's more important. The theatre can wait, but they can't.
And back, and again, in, and back, now to your right.
In the past 3 years, I've really concentrated on my children. I've had the odd TV and video work. In 1995, Sign On asked me to appear in Under the Lamp. That was exciting. Other programmes I'd worked on had a hearing perspective on deaf people, and it wasn't right. Sign On have a political awareness that allowed me to act the way I knew it should be done. I enjoyed that.
Turn the lamp off, eh? But I want to read. And I've got to get up early tomorrow. I've got an interview, you know that.
Oh, come on. The light's over here for me reading. You can manage. You've done it before.
I can't tonight. The light's bothering me. I need me sleep. Now turn it off.
Hearing perceptions of deaf people and what they want are not right. It's deaf people who should be in control and involved in every aspect of production. Integration means deaf people have no control. For example, we used to have the British Theatre of the Deaf, who did some wonderful work. Now we have nothing. In America and Australia they have theatres of the deaf, but there's nothing here.
I think Jean can achieve whatever she wants. If she sets herself a goal, she'll work towards it with complete dedication till she achieves it, whatever it is. That's Jean.
When Children of a Lesser God finished, I would have liked more theatre work. But the most powerful, emotional experience of my life has been the birth of my children. I want to store all the emotions of motherhood inside me, and when I return to the theatre, I'll have all that, so much more to express.